Mark had promised himself he wouldn't let his friends rope him into another setup. But here he was, standing outside the little cafe on Elm Street, counting his breaths like he was preparing for a job interview rather than a blind date. He adjusted the collar of his shirt for the 5th time, knowing full well it wouldn't sit any better than before. His co-workers had insisted this would be good for him, that he needed a night out that didn't involve cartoons, laundry, or the never-ending task of figuring out what 7-year-olds considered edible. Still, part of him wondered if he was doing something wrong, like stepping into unfamiliar territory without a map. Inside the cafe, the warm glow of amber lights softened the chatter of evening crowds. The smell of ground coffee and cinnamon felt strangely comforting, like the place understood nerves better than people did. Mark scanned the room, unsure what or who he was looking for. His friends hadn't offered much detail beyond her name, Lena. "She's sweet, you'll like her," they'd said. It was vague, too vague, and he briefly wondered if they were hiding something or simply terrible at describing humans. Then he saw her. She stood near a corner table, smoothing the sunflower-patterned dress she wore, her fingers trembling just enough to betray her nerves. Her body was soft and round, the kind of shape he knew some people judged instantly. But what struck him wasn't her size. It was her eyes, warm, cautious, hopeful, like someone who'd talked herself into showing up even though she'd given herself a dozen reasons not to. Their eyes met, and she straightened a little, offering a small, polite smile. He felt something unclench inside him. This wasn't a setup. It was two people trying, really trying, not to give up on the idea that life still had good surprises. "Hi, you must be Mark," she said, her voice gentle, unsure. He nodded, stepping forward, suddenly aware of his heartbeat. "Yeah. And you're Lena?" She laughed softly, the sound fragile but sincere. "That's me. I wasn't sure if you'd actually show." "Honestly?" he admitted with a sheepish grin. "I wasn't sure if I would either." Her shoulders relaxed, a tiny easing of tension, as if honesty had been the exact right answer. And somehow, in that moment, the awkwardness dissolved, like both of them had silently agreed to make tonight easier than the world usually was. Coffee turned into dinner so naturally that neither of them realized how much time had passed until the cafe lights dimmed slightly for the evening rush. They moved to a booth against the window, where the glow from the street outside framed Lena's face every time she looked up. At first, she kept tucking her hair behind her ear, fidgeting with her napkin, saying small, polite things, weather, work, the usual soft buffers people lay out when they're afraid of being fully seen. But as minutes slipped into hours, her guard loosened. She told him about the bakery she dreamed of opening, the one she'd sketched out in notebooks since she was 16. "Not fancy," she said with a little shrug. "Just a place that smells like home. You know, real butter, mismatched mugs. The kind of place people sit in even when their coffee's gone." When she spoke about it, she stopped fidgeting. Her hands moved with purpose, painting worlds in the air, her voice gaining a quiet confidence that made Mark lean in closer without meaning to. He shared pieces of his own life in return, how mornings with Evan were chaos wrapped in affection, how parenting alone meant carrying twice the weight, twice the worry, how he sometimes felt guilty for wanting something more than survival. Lena didn't interrupt with cliches or empty reassurances. She just listened, nodding softly, her expression open in a way that made it easy to keep talking. Easier than it should have been. As they walked out after dinner, the night air cool against their flushed faces, the conversation dipped into the kind of truths people usually hide on first dates. Lena exhaled, long and shaky, and said, "I used to think my worth depended on how small I could make myself. My body, my voice, everything." She gave a crooked smile, the kind made from old wounds. "But shrinking didn't make life kinder. It just made me tired." Mark didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it sit, let her breathe. Then he said quietly but firmly, "Your size isn't the most interesting thing about you. It's not even close." She blinked at him, startled, and for a moment her eyes shone with something like disbelief, then gratitude. They kept walking, steps slow, breaths easy, two people realizing they had slipped past small talk into something real without even noticing. They had just stepped outside when the sound of hurried footsteps broke through the quiet night. Mark didn't even have time to turn before Evan came barreling toward him, jacket unzipped, shoelaces trailing behind like little tails. The babysitter rushed after him, breathless and apologizing. explaining that Evan had insisted on seeing his dad the moment she realized her shift had been double booked. Mark barely heard her. His attention was fixed on his son, who had skidded to a stop directly in front of Lena. Evan stared up at her with the blunt, fearless curiosity of a child. No hesitation, no filter, just open eyes absorbing the world. He took in her sunflower dress, her soft-cheeked smile, the nervous way she held her purse. Then his gaze drifted to the necklace resting against her collarbone, a small silver star. "You're really pretty," he said with the earnest certainty only children possessed. Lena froze, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes widening in surprise. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob, as though she didn't quite know what to do with a compliment that pure. Mark felt his heart squeeze. He hadn't seen his son offer that kind of unprompted kindness in months. Not since he'd started asking questions Mark didn't always know how to answer. "Buddy," Mark said gently, kneeling beside him. "What did we talk about?" "About being kind?" "I am being kind," Evan insisted, frowning as if the concept itself were obvious. He pointed at the necklace. "She wears a star like Mommy used to. Mommy had one that glowed a little inside when the light hit it. She said it was her wish star." Lena's breath hitched. She touched the necklace lightly, as though it had become something fragile in that instant. "My mom gave this to me," she whispered, voice trembling. "She told me it was for good luck. I've never heard someone describe it like that before." Mark felt suddenly unsteady, like something inside him had cracked open without warning. The last thing he expected tonight was collision. Past and present meeting in a stranger's necklace, in a child's memory spoken aloud. He swallowed hard, blinking away the sudden sting in his eyes. The babysitter quietly excused herself, slipping back into the cafe, sensing the moment wasn't hers to intrude on. Evan, oblivious to the heaviness around him, reached out and wrapped his small fingers around Lena's hand. "You can keep the wish," he said softly. "Mommy said wishes work better when you share them." Lena's chin trembled and she dropped to her knees so she was eye level with him. "Thank you," she whispered. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." Mark watched them, his son trusting, this woman he barely knew holding back tears, and felt something unfamiliar yet painfully welcome bloom in his chest. A warmth he thought grief had hollowed out forever. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The world around them seemed to quiet itself. Cars passing sounded farther away. The chatter from the cafe softened. Even the breeze felt like it held its breath. Lena rose slowly from where she'd kneeled, her fingers still wrapped lightly around Evan's hand, as if letting go too quickly might break the delicate magic of the moment. Mark watched her, watched them both, and something inside him shifted with a depth he wasn't prepared for. It wasn't romantic lightning or a sudden revelation. It was gentler than that, something warm and steady, like remembering a truth he'd forgotten he was allowed to feel. Evan wandered a few steps toward the glowing street lamp, marveling at how his shadow stretched across the pavement. Mark took that moment to speak, his voice low, almost unsure at first. "Lena," he began, "I want to say something, but I don't want it to come out wrong." She turned to him, cheeks flushed, eyes still watery but open. Wide open, like she'd decided honesty was the only language worth speaking tonight. "You can say it," she murmured, "whatever it is." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't come tonight looking for anything except maybe a reason to prove to my friends that I'm fine, that I'm managing, that I don't need more." He paused, the words pushing up from somewhere deeper than he expected. "But then I met you, and you didn't ask anything of me. You just talked, you listened. You were real, and I don't think I realized how much I've missed that." Lena's breath caught, her lips parting as though she'd forgotten how to respond. Mark stepped closer, not too close, but enough that she could feel the sincerity in the space between them. "I'm not looking for perfection," he said softly. "I'm not even sure I'd recognize it anymore. But what I do recognize, what I felt tonight, is someone who isn't pretending. Someone who shows up even when it's hard. And that means more to me than you know." Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Not fast, not dramatic, just quiet, honest tears from someone who wasn't used to being seen without judgment. She tried to laugh it off, wiping at her face. "I wasn't expecting anything tonight either," she admitted, voice breaking. "I almost didn't come. I've been told so many times I'm too much or not enough that I've started believing it." "You're enough," Mark said immediately firmly. "Exactly as you are." A tiny, disbelieving smile tugged at her mouth, and she pressed a hand against her chest as if steadying her heart. Evan came bounding back to them then, reaching up to take each of their hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. Lena looked down at him, then at Mark, and something hopeful, something brave, sparked in her expression. "Would you maybe want to see each other again?" she asked. Mark squeezed her hand. "Yeah," he said, voice warm and sure. "I really would." And for the first time in a long time, the night didn't feel heavy or lonely or filled with what-ifs. It felt like a beginning, quiet, unexpected, and beautifully real.